Hey everyone, how's it going? Keenan here. This video is going to be about creating guitar tones using one of the songs from my EP, This Is Mutiny. Specifically, I'm going to talk about how I use this amp suite, Peavey Revalver, to create the guitar tones for a heavy rock or metal track. So this is my Reaper session, and I'm going to just play the intro for you to give you a feel for how this sounds. So that's kind of the song. It's more of an upbeat and aggressive sounding track. This EP I wrote, recorded, and produced completely here in my home studio, and Peavey Revalver 4 is one of the central components to the creation of my recordings. So we'll start with this intro guitar here. I really wanted to give this intro here kind of a tribal, almost wild jungle kind of vibe, building around this clean guitar melody here. So that's the sound. To create this tone, I'm using Peavey Revalver, one of their Act Combo modules, which is kind of an amp profiling module. This one's called the Wagner Ecstasy. I believe it's a take on the Wagner Ecstasy head. So it's just a clean tone, a noise gate on the stomp box section, and some reverb and delay here using the worldwide verb. I really love this module. It can do a very wide stereo sound if you really drive the wet knob. So after that, we've got this guitar swell here. So this goes into kind of how I arrange a song. One of the most important factors to getting a heavy and aggressive sound is using moments of impact. You want to kind of try to build up the energy and build up the intensity going into the section. So these instruments here, these are all VSTs. We've got a kind of African drum sound. There's some wind chimes, something called a cloud drum VST that I'm using here. This entire section was composed with the idea in mind of building up some intensity, building up that impact for when the full band comes in. So I'm going to switch over to the rhythm guitars here and just show you what I'm using. So this is the amp model that I'm using for all of the rhythm guitars. These are triple tracked, left, right, and center, 80% left and right to be exact. I'm really not a big fan of doing hard panning, hard left and right. I actually think that guitars tend to sound wider when you just go a little bit under 100% left and right. I would say usually around 80-90% is where I set them. So I'm using the Angel PB head here. This is one of my favorite heads for high gain sounds. You can tell here I really like to just almost dime the mid knob. I really like to have a lot of mid-range in the guitar tone. It makes it so that I have to do less in post-mixing and post-processing. We've got the treble dialed up here to around 1 o'clock. The bass, I usually roll back to around 10. One of the biggest parts of getting this sound here is I'm using this Buddha OM overdrive. Normally this tone knob I would have all the way down. I usually like rhythm sounds with the tone knob all the way off, but just for this song I wanted to have this tone knob all the way full. It just helps these guitars cut through a little bit more. All the rhythm guitars are using the same settings with the same modules. For cabinet impulses, I'm using the 3 Sigma Audio EVH 5153 impulses. Really good. I tend to dial in some treble on this impulse response loader just because I think that most impulse response loaders tend to have a bit of a darker sound for the IR. So I'll just dial up some treble here. I'll play these in solo and give you a feel for how the guitars sound. So that's the main riff in the intro. Actually, what would be cool if I just played you the entire build up here, this moment of impact, where the guitar swell kind of signals that moment of impact coming in. Notice how the guitar volume swell and then the pick slide, it kind of tells you that there's about to be a big impact coming in. So let's just look at this guitar swell actually for a moment. This is one of the things I really love about Peavey Revalver, is that it has a lot of realism to it. I like to get a lot of dynamics out of an amp sim, and one of the ways I can tell how dynamic an amp's gonna sound is how it responds to volume changes on the guitar tone. So I'm using the same module here, the Angel PB, going to the same cab with the same settings and everything. It just makes things a lot easier come time for mix down. So let's look at post-processing. On these two intro guitars here, I'm really only using just some compression on the main guitar melody. Jumping over to the rhythm guitars, so there's really no EQ on the left and right guitars, just on the center here, just doing some cuts, some high passing here at around 100 Hertz, just to make more room for the bass, and another EQ on this track, just cutting out even more low end. Here, there's another high pass, and a dip at around 250. I felt that there was still some low end in there that was impeding on the bass territory, so I just wanted to clean up the low end just on this center guitar. On the guitar bus is where a lot of the heavy lifting is really happening. We've got another EQ, which is again doing a lot of cuts. I don't tend to do a lot of additive EQ across tracks. I find that with Revalver especially, I can get my source tone sounding as close as possible to the final sound that I want, and then it's just a matter of carving out spaces of frequencies to let all the instruments kind of sit in their own pocket. So there's going to be more cuts than boosts on a lot of my mixes. Here I've cut around 3K and around 4.6K just to get rid of some problem frequencies, some high frequencies that I found a little bit annoying. When you kind of stack high gain rhythm tracks like this, you will get a buildup of frequencies, particularly in this 4 to 6K range. This is usually where I target the most. It gets kind of harsh up in that frequency, so I'll dial these back by about 4 dB. Again, going across all of the guitar channels. I'm not going individually. It just saves some processing power when you can process all the guitars at once on just one bus track. So after that first round of EQ, we've got really the magic here happens with this tape saturation plugin. I love using tape saturations. It really adds some extra harmonics. It adds some body and weight to the guitar sound. I'm actually going to play these guitars in solo, and then I'll bypass this saturation plugin. This is the Tone Booster's real bus, by the way. And I'll just bypass this in and out so you can see just how much it affects the energy of the performance. Yeah, it just brings just a lot more clarity. It sounds like it's getting louder, but it's actually not. There's even an auto gain feature on the real bus. It's just adding more harmonics. It's adding a little bit of compression just to bring the energy and the performance just up front and center. And it helps these guitars really stand out in a mix. So this is one thing I always do is I use saturation across the entire guitar bus, and that really does the heavy lifting for helping the guitars just stand out and sound more wide, sound more present. And then after that, another EQ. This is a mid-side EQ, and I'm using this band here in side mode to boost back some of that 3.8K that I lost with the first round of EQ. And again, this is going on the side, so this isn't happening in the center of the signal. This is happening on the edges of the speaker. One of the ways you can kind of get more width and presence to your guitar sound is to use a side EQ and boost some of this mid-range just on the sides. It helps you kind of perceive the edges of the stereo spectrum a little bit more. And just another bell here, dipping out some more of that 245 range. I want the bass and the kick drum to occupy this frequency more than the guitars. This is important, especially with low-tuned, high-gain guitars. This song is in drop A sharp, so it's quite low. When you start stacking guitars again here, you'll get a build-up of frequencies. It'll get a little bit muddy, a little bit boxy, so I tend to dial this down a bit. And then, surprise, another EQ, just cutting out some more of that frequency that I boosted with the real bus and with the side EQ. It's kind of always going to be a bit of a push and pull when you're mixing. You'll make an adjustment, you'll listen to it in context, then you'll dial it back, you'll tweak things a little bit until you get a good balance. There's always going to be kind of a trade-off or a balance that needs to be reached when you're stacking guitars, when you've got this many elements in a song. And this here, a dynamic EQ. Doing some dip around 3K. This is automated to only be active during one part of the song, and that's going into the bridge section. I'll show you when we get to that part. So let's move on over to this guitar lead that happens in the intro riff. I'll solo this for you. Yeah, really cool. So for this sound, I'm using, again, Revalver 4. We're using the same amp module, the Angel PB, with the same settings and everything. And this guitar is just to add, again, some more melody, some more movement to the song. And there's some delay sends going on here. I love using delay to create more movement in a song, to create some stereo crossover. And in this case, I'm setting this to a quarter note delay to get just some stereo movement again with this section. So I'll play this in context again. So for settings here, I'm using the exact same settings as the rhythm channel. We've got the mid knob dialed quite high, some treble, and again, cutting out some bass here. This guitar is very present, especially when you're playing notes high up on the fretboard like this. I really like the way that the Angel PB can handle everything from kind of low palm muted notes all the way up to higher frequency, high register notes, and just the gain of this amp. It works very well even when you stack them up like this. So now going into the chorus section, I'm just gonna play a little bit of this. I'll put the vocals in and just show you. I really like this section here.
Hear the sound of a dying fear. Open up our eyes to see you fall. Waiting for the war you left for me. This is a mutiny.
Quite a hard-hitting chorus. This is one of the heavier songs on the EP. A lot of stacked vocals and delay throws going on. I really want to focus in on this droning kind of lead line that I've got going on here in the chorus. That part doesn't sound very impressive on its own, but again, the way that I use the guitar and the way that I use different sounds just to create more melody and movement, that can really add a lot of finer detail to a song that really is more pleasing to the ear than just having rhythm by itself. So let me play this in context with the rest of the band again, and I'll take this lead guitar in and out, and you can see how it just sounds like there's something missing as soon as it's not in the mix.
Hear the sound of a dying fear. Open up our eyes to see you fall. Waiting for the war.
So you can hear when I remove that track from the mix, it just sounds like there's a hole in the mix now, that there's something missing that should be there. Really cool. I love using the guitar and using Revalver to create vibe and more melody and more melodic movement across the song. It's these finer details that really take a song or a section from good to really something great. Now this is quite unusual. I want to point out here on these rhythm guitars, there's actually a bit of a delay tail that I have across all the rhythm guitars. This is unusual because if you've learned about metal production or if you've read anything online, you've probably heard never to do this, that low-tuned, high-gain, distorted rhythm guitars just don't sound very good with a reverb or a delay tail. So once you understand the rules, then you can break them. I'll play this and then I'll mute it out so you can hear the trail going after I hit stop. Yeah, again, just because this song has a lot of movement, there's a lot of moving parts in the track, so I kind of wanted to use that to my advantage and then to just create some subtle vibe here and there using different amounts of delay, different amounts of reverb, and use that movement that this song is bringing kind of to my advantage. So we're using the again delay with a delay of 384 milliseconds. I don't think that I've tapped this out to tempo. I think I kind of just dialed it in to taste using my ear and then just dialed back the wet knob around 12.5%. You could hear it just a little bit when it's soloed, but in the mix, you would never be able to tell that there's a delay here. Yeah, really cool stuff, but we've got even more guitar parts here. So let's dive in now to the solo section. It's a really cool section. Now again, remember I said that there was a dynamic EQ that's automated on and off to only come in on this section. I'll just play the solo section for you and you can hear what we're working with. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm a huge fan of guitar solos. This solo was performed by a great guitarist, Mike Hall, one of my good friends. The solo was actually tracked in his home studio in New Hampshire. I'm really a fan of leads and guitar solos, and I love hearing new bands that are coming out that are still playing solos and leads in their music. So there's quite a lot of guitar solos on the EP between Mike and myself. So if we jump over to his solo track. Now, as I said, this solo was tracked in his studio, so the stem came to me with the final tone already printed, but that doesn't mean that I can't still use Revalver to add to it. This amp suite has me breaking rules all over the place. I'm not sure if this has ever been done before, but there's no rules to it, so I figured why not give it a try. So I've duplicated his guitar track, and on the duplicate I'm using just the flat hill amp head, the clean channel. I'm using mostly just the bass knob here with some presence, and I've dialed back the gain. Again, I'm not sure if this has ever been tried before, but I feel that just the balance of the frequencies, it really kind of makes the tone sound a little bit thicker in the center, and there's also some delay and reverb and other stereo effects going on. So I'll just play this in solo, and I'll mute out this duplicate track with Revalver. Again, really subtle, very subtle. I'm not actually completely sure if this is just making an increase in volume, but there are quite a few differences in the frequencies. I've actually low passed the duplicate track here up to around 6.4K, kind of a wide low pass. And then again, taking out some of that 3 kilohertz range where I really wanted the original track to stand out. On the original track, there's just one round of EQ at around 4.8K up to 5K, just taking out a bit more of that energy just to let some of the rest of the instruments like the cymbals and the snare be able to cut through a little bit more. And then after that, we've got the guitar solo bus here. I high passed at around 226 to let the kick and the bass cut through more. This guitar solo should sit higher up in the frequency spectrum anyway. I cut it around 2.3K, another at around 3.8K, and just a slight low pass at around 15 hertz. I'm not too worried about this frequency range. I may just be being a little extra cautious here. I'm using some compression to just add to the sustain of this guitar solo. I really wanted some of those notes, especially the pick attack where he's doing the tremolo picking. I wanted to keep all those notes up front and clear, especially through the kind of palm muted guitar riff that we've got in the background. So I'll solo this solo again, and I'll turn the compression on and off, and you can hear what it does. Let's hear that in the mix. I want you to listen out for the pick attack. He's doing some very fast tremolo picking. When I turn off the compression, you can hear that the attack of those notes, of those picked notes, they kind of fade into the background, to the music a little bit. And when I engage the compressor, just the attack of that pick striking the strings in rapid succession, it comes up a little bit more. I really love the aggressive sound of his picking style. So I wanted to have those just to come through a little bit more clearly. Yeah, really cool. And again, this guitar is going through some reverb and delay. It's going through this plate reverb here on a plate setting. And it's also going through this half note delay here in rear delay in stereo. And now my quarter and my half note delay both have this multi-band distortion going just to darken up the sound, add some drive to it, some saturation. I'll actually just solo the delay because I think it's really cool. Yeah, you can hear when I bypass this plugin, the delay does thin out a lot more. And when I engage it, it just gets a little bit more thicker and woolly sounding. Just a little trick there for you. Now we've got the outro section where I've got a series of several guitar tracks, each playing different things, but I'm sending various amounts of delay between a quarter and a half note delay to create kind of this stereo crossover. And there's also some volume automation to tuck different elements into the mix. I'll play this section for you.
What you left for me, this is a mutiny.
Yeah, just a very dark and kind of dreary outro. It's kind of fading down in volume as it plays out. So you can hear, again, we've got this main guitar melody here coming back into the focus at the outro section. And then we've actually got 3 other guitar melodies that are playing here at the same time. I'll just play these as they come in. Yeah, I love those delay trails. So the first thing that comes in this outro is another guitar swell. And again, I'm using the same settings as before, the Angel PB with the Buddha OM overdrive. This time I did dial back the tone knobs a little bit. I wanted this outro to have a little bit of a darker sound. What I love about this overdrive is that its tone knob is very effective in how it changes just the timbre of the mid-range frequencies. I'll play this swell here and I'll dial this knob up and down so you can get a feel for it. Again, a lot of these elements are very subtle and quite low in the mix. I would really have to solo for you to hear all the fine details. This is one of the things about having a heavy sound, and it really ties into the way that I use Revalver and my arrangement process, is that you've got to have moments where you dial back the intensity, dial back the gain a little bit, and maybe use a clean guitar sound or just a slightly push, clean breakup sound. You want to have moments of lower intensity so that when you bring in the rest of the band, you bring in your heavy parts, they have more impact when they come in. This is one of the ways that you can kind of build up to those moments, and your song will be a lot more heavier as a result. So here we've got another melodic picking part that's going through some reverb and some delay, comes in about halfway through the outro. Here I'm using the Buddha OM overdrive, this time with the tone set to center. I'm really getting most of my sound from a series of EQ. Now here I'm just cutting out a little bit more of that 3.6K range, but here I've actually filtered this guitar almost entirely to get that kind of claustrophobic telephone booth sound to this. So actually, let me just bypass this EQ on and off, and you can hear how much it changes the entire feel of this section. That's night and day. That's one of the really cool things you can do with just some EQ if you can get a good source tone from your amp. I really recommend trying this telephone booth sound. It's a high pass filter up to 4K, up to 400, I'm sorry, and a low pass up to 4K, and then a huge dip in the mid range around 2.8K. And this is one of my favorite ways to create dimension and to create more depth and vibe to a sound. I wanted this kind of, feel like you're fading away. Nothing is too far in the background, but then nothing is too far up front. I think it struck a very cool balance. So again, we've got all these elements going in varying amounts to these quarter and half note delays here. It just creates a wave of sound coming at you from all directions. Now I do have even more delay coming from Revalver with the again delay. Using the same settings really as the rhythm guitar tracks. It just have 12.5%, 384 millisecond delay. It just adds a bit extra more on top in terms of stereo movement. But if I bypass these delays, you can see it again changes the entire vibe of this section. Not only do we lose some of that movement and some of that vibe, we also lose quite a bit of volume. Using sends is one of the ways that you can make your mix louder because you're essentially adding more volume going into the master bus. You'll have a louder result overall. So yeah, with Revalver, I've got everything from my crystal clean guitar sounds to my light drive sounds, all the way to just ferocious high gain, and it can do everything that I would want an amp program to do. So yeah, that's a run through of the guitar sounds on the record. If you would like to check out the full song, then I'll put a link in the description. You can find it on Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, or any major streaming platform. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that you could take some value away from this, and I'll see you guys in more videos to come.